Hey guys, it's Sebastian back, and today we're back with Lost Hombres. This is episode 13, and today I just want to do like a bit of an exploration on masculinity, what it means for me, and kind of like the things that I see are affecting men these days, and really like trying to break down some of the problems that I feel that as a society, as a country, as a world right now, we're having some problems with the way that we're being educated and how to take care of the human body, experience, mind, conscious state, everything. So this problem is really impacting men because they're losing their insight on how to develop themselves. I mean, it's gonna be a lot of things. Like it could be like a systematic problem, a systemic problem. It could be from generational trauma. There's a lot of reasons that could be caused a lot of the problems that we're dealing with. But ideally, what I want to talk about today is explore some of the main points that I feel are really impacting us. Explore some of the struggles and the problems that I've seen play out, and kind of provide my feedback, my insight, how to work through some of these issues, and really try to identify what the role is that we play in this society. Because once someone can identify at least the basics to how the system should operate, it starts to perform pretty well, right? It's when we live in a way we're not designed to live that we start to struggle, right? It's like cars were designed to, run off gasoline. So if you put a different type of oil in there, it might run for a while, but it wasn't designed to run on that oil. It wasn't designed to run on that power source. And so when you can figure out how you're designed to operate and the way your body's supposed to work, well, that allows you to be able to live up to your highest standard, up to your highest ability, because you're helping the vessel, right? The human body, the human experience be optimized so that it can function at its highest capacity. So, anyways, yeah, let's talk a little bit about that. So, I've come to the conclusion throughout my time as a therapist and just being in the world as another fellow human being, sentient human, that men and women are different. They have some differences in the way they operate. Now, there's a lot of things that we need to take into consideration. That there are, how would I say, like variations of everything to a degree. Whether it's people's body type, personality type, and everything, right? Interest type. We're a bunch of varieties of different things. Even our genetics can have major varieties that completely. You got people that can be born with their organs on the opposite sides. So it's like when you can have that kind of a genetic wiring and those genetic like challenges or deficits, whatever you want to call them, like whatever you want to like label a genetic variation to some extent, that means that there's pretty much a lot of possibilities that can exist. And as long as the genes can do it, it's a possibility, right? So at the end of the day, when people are not fitting like a specific stereotype, or they're not specific, they're like fitting a specific like bell curve example, like a percentage based. The reality is that there's always going to be those exceptions. That's how we get to changes. That's how we became humans. Those genetic varieties over time built us into what we are. So genetic varieties aren't necessarily a bad thing. It's just something different. So it's a different approach to whatever that problem was. And we need variety because that also is what helps us evolve and keep adapting. So variety is not bad. It's just a part of what programming is, like intelligent design, as I like to call it. So that being said, there's different like styles of how people can be, but in general, you see some common like patterns play out. And so, from what I've been able to kind of gather, men are the providers of like security and consistency, and women provide love and comfort, right? So like that's the duality in between those. And so when a guy can be very consistent in what he's doing with like his work, his goals, his determination. So passion, hobbies, interest, his independence, future, and self-respect. So when he's following through with those different things, then that allows him to build that confidence, right? To keep going and pushing forward. And so on his end, he wants to be able to sustain a certain degree of, like I said, consistency, right? So I like to think of the guy as the earth. So they have to be stable and consistent. And then I would say that women are like the of nature, and so they provide, the top end, right? They fill up the void. So as much as the earth is consistent, right, and stable, it's not beautiful. It's not something. It's not alive. It's there. It's existence. And for me, this kind of plays back into how there's a difference between how men and women operate. For example, like men tend to they can answer the door in their underwear, like they don't care, right? They have that sense of security, but they are very lonely. They don't feel like there's somebody there. They feel isolated. And so again, very consistent, right? Minimal, whatever, just the same, very routine. So that routine, that sameness, that very consistency, and that sense of security that they have, that's what they offer, right? But again, if you think about the average like bachelor pad, there's a reason why these words exist, like bachelor pad and stuff, because there's some kind of sense of like connection that people have, right? So there's these themes that play out, and these themes have some sense in reality, right? Whether it's like the difference between most average teenage boys and teenage girls. It's different when we're putting ideas into people, and it's also when they are seeking these ideas. Like you could have a very neutral family where you don't necessarily like push any kind of agenda, and the kids naturally will tell you why they're looking for something, why they like it. And then you even see these trends play out in adults, right? So why would someone who's an adult who has all the ability and right to tell you what they're actually feeling, what's going on, right? That they say the same things, right? They have the same interests, they have the same desires as those the kid versions of themselves. So once you can incorporate the idea that there's some sort of like normality between the genders and what we experience, at least for the like I said, the bell curve, you could say, then we can start to understand the connections that we have on a deeper level. Now, I will say there's something else to think about too. There are different relationship styles that I see out in the world. I like to say the giver and the taker, right? Or the giver and the receiver. Because I don't want to just say taker because it just depends on the relationship. Sometimes there's a taker, sometimes there's a receiver. Ta-da. Okay. So the giver is the person providing, and the person is so one person's receiving. This happens in conversation. This happens in like just every day. Like if I'm doing the dishes, that person's receiving the benefit of me doing the dishes, right? So everything in life is like a give and take to some extent. So what we have here is we have different models. So we have what I like to call like alpha beta, right? So alpha beta is like your classic. One's like the provider and one's the receiver, right? So they kind of do their part. Like one's providing that consistency and that direct sense of direction, and one's providing that support, right? So they work as a team. It's like Batman and Robin. There's always like a dynamic that can play out. So that's them too, right? Alpha beta, leader and follower, right? Whatever, right? Provider and receiver. Okay. The next one you could say is two omegas. So omegas are switches. They'll go between both. Like sometimes they're providing, sometimes they're receiving. Sometimes they're providing, sometimes they're receiving. And you could say in general, all relationships have some degree of that, but these people literally like take roles which are completely like they will take over for like a day or two. Like they have sustained desires to kind of equal, like have it equal consistently. So that would be in an omega relationship. Then you have double alpha. Double alpha are two go-getters, but the problem is double alphas don't want to sit there and do all the other chores, the like take care of this and that and put this. They're pushing boundaries all the time. They're go 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 go. So those people usually hire somebody to do what they would call the beta work, right? Now, on the other hand, you can have two people that are betas. Now, these people are going to obviously require some kind of alpha around to take care of them. So this is people that are, living at their parents' house. Like someone else has to do the main work, right? So they're just kind of in a safe environment. Now, sometimes there are certain families that want that. They're okay with their kids living with them. That they're happy with that. So again, it goes back to like what I said at the beginning. Everybody has their own kind of social dynamic wiring, whatever. You all are built differently. And so when we look at that dynamic, you can see again, these are like people that require somebody to, provide. That you could say, they're even like people that would be that classic. I don't want to work. I don't want to do things. I just want to be taken care of. So you have a variety of the different selves and the different people that are out there, the different kind of styles that exist, right? So when I think of like a relationship, I think of it more of like what kind of style does it fit into, more than like what the gender roles are, because again, that doesn't matter as much as there are different styles that exist, and that's what really connects people. It's the different styles that we have. So once we understand that it has nothing to do with like the gender role necessarily, but more the style of relationship that we want, that defines who we become and what we are. We'll become more. I would see that would be easier for people to accept and like grow from than like self-hating because they're not living up to a certain standard. If people understood there was a different variety of standards that existed, then they wouldn't be so self-hating on themselves, and they actually would be able to feel like, hey, I understand what's going on. I understand the dynamic, because as long as I can meet like my partner who's in that same style that I'm looking for, then we can meet that role that we're both trying to find, right? So this also goes back to this idea that I have, that when you're in a family dynamic, there's kind of two versions of each parent. And so you have father and dad, and you have mother and mom. And so father and mother are the ones that are being productive. They're the ones getting things done. They're the ones working, working their ass off, get everything caught up. So that's mother and father, right? They're up here. And then you have mom and dad. And mom and dad are the example of what you would do when you're trying to, have fun with your kids and relax and be yourself. And so you go out of that stress brain. You go into that fun brain, right? So you're still like, being a parent, you're still there for them, you're still being available, but you're not as stressed out. You're more in the present, in the moment, working with the systems and the outcomes. And so it's improving your mental health. It's improving your communication skills because you're living in the moment with them. So that's why we want to differentiate mother and father, and then mom and dad, right? So we can understand where we're at in our household, and also take that same concept and say, when am I being the man and when am I being the boy, right? And again, it's kind of funny, right? Because you get the bad boy or the gentleman. So you want to be like the gentleman, right? Because you want to like understand the needs of people, but also not back down, like stand your ground and be able to say, hey, this is where I'm at. This is what I believe. Be assertive in your communication style. Be firm in what you believe, but also be open minded, right? And feel what other people are experiencing. Have compassion, right? Have empathy. And that's one of the things that I really believe is missing in our society, right? We're having a spiritual problem. When you hear the word spiritual warfare, I'm going to explain what that really means. Okay. So, from my perspective, spiritual warfare is this idea that there are like these energies that we're experiencing that are affecting us. And let me explain what energy means. So, sometimes you get a gut feeling and you get a bad vibe from somebody, like a vibration, right? So, you're getting a weird feeling from somebody in the room. And that's because your heart is like a projecting magnet. That beat you're sending off, right? Well, your gut is also a receiver, right? So you're receiving data, and so you're receiving that weird vibe, like, hey, I feel like someone's watching me. That's because people are giving off energy. Literally, you can feel energy. Like, we're giving off a signal. They've even been able to pick this up in science. Like, that we give off like vibrations. And so that vibe, we have the ability to pick up on what it is. Now, when we're kids, we don't question it, we just feel it. So we just start reacting immediately, like, oh, I don't like that over there. I don't like that vibe I'm getting. When we're adults, we kind of question it more, like, I'm just going to ignore it. Like, yeah, whatever. He's weird, but whatever. And so instead of just accepting what we're feeling, the vibrations that we're picking up, the signals, right? We start to question it, and then we don't respond appropriately because we have this vibration happening and we're not going right. We're not reacting appropriately. So we let things slide. But this is what we're talking about when we're talking about energies. When we're talking about, there's a spiritual warfare. Spirit has to do with the ether, the energies that we experience. Sometimes you get a gut feeling like, don't go over there. Don't go to that party. Don't go down that road. You just get a feeling. You don't understand why, but you get a feeling about what's going on. So then what you end up seeing is how much you start working towards, developing your passions, your hobbies, your interests, and really finding who you are so that you can start to develop that confidence, that desire. And then you also have to work on your future, your self-respect, and your independence, so you can continue, right, to also feel positive up here. And when you do both of these and you combine them together, that allows you to move forward, right, and have that confidence. And what I would call is that spiritual power, right? So the more that you work on your divinity, your magic, right, your force, the more that you work on your heart, which is taking care of the mind and the gut, the stronger that your energy becomes. The stronger this energy becomes, the better you are at using it on situations or people who may be trying to take that away from you, like hurt you, drain you. We even say the word drain. I feel drained today. I feel burnt out. Like they took out my energy. So when you are giving this energy to other people, they are draining you because you're taking it away from who? Yourself. And so when you focus your energy inward, right, you develop yourself, you only continue to grow that divinity. Because you're like, I'm living my purpose. I'm growing as a person that I am, right? So you lift yourself up into that next level. And so when you're pushing yourself, into your maximum capacity, you start to glow, you start to have light, and that light is power. And that's that spiritual warfare. Is that when you have high spirits, like a high vibration, yeah, not yeah. Like literally a high vibration, those are energies, right? Spiritual energy, divine energy, all this stuff is connected. It's like the way we want to understand frequencies, low frequencies, high frequencies. So when someone's a low frequency, they're very much like this and down and whatever. And they're low on their frequency. When you have someone high frequencies, hey, what's up? Da, 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 like they're on a higher vibration, they're on a higher level, they're spiritually high versus spiritually low, right? So we could just take this and say divinity, magic. There's a lot of words that we can use for this energy that we experience. But when you feel someone watching you, it's because you're feeling their energy, and your energy doesn't just work this way, it works all around you. So you're feeling a vibration from over there, you're getting a bad vibe of weird feeling because the feeling doesn't understand, it feels, it's reacting to the environment because it's designed to feel what's in the environment. Your thoughts are meant to analyze what the feeling is. So the more that you trust your gut, the better off you're going to be because your gut's always right. Your gut's the real mechanism for reading the room. Literally, it reads the room. You just get a weird feeling like, because it's reading the room. This is what's supposed to help you pick up on the pattern, right? Like, oh, yeah, I definitely know what that means. I have felt this before. It's this. You're going to react to something before you think about it, but sometimes you'll be feeling, and before you completely understand what you're feeling, so you don't know how to really respond yet because you're not sure how you feel. If you can make the connection, oh, it's this, then you could make a response to change the behavior, which can change your habits, right? And so again, really what's going on here is there's a lack of knowledge of how this system operates and really what's supposed to be going on to like understand this spiritual warfare that we're experiencing. And that spiritual warfare is impacting the lives of a lot of men in general, older men, young, all just men in general, because they're falling for this propaganda. They're falling for the trap. They're they are having their hearts destroyed, and these hearts being destroyed is leaving them broken and vulnerable to manipulation, right? Because they don't have empathy. They turn off their empathy mechanism, and then they weaponize that lack of empathy to use them against each other. And so what you see here is they have created like a misery loves company style of warfare, where they're ruining people's lives and making them miserable, which then causes them to want to ruin other people. And so they're causing a chain effect, and they keep themselves safe because they have power, right? And so they rule through fear and manipulation, right? And so it's a lot easier to rule through fear manipulation, especially when you control information. And on the other hand, for example, the spiritual side, the good side, has to live through truth, has to live through discipline and well-being. And they are counter to that because they're going to want to, because they've lost their empathy, their soul. They're going to try to feed off anybody that has a soul. So they're essentially puppets to the people that are running the show. They've become like they're like demon hounds, like they're attack dogs. And so even though the top, they're over there making these people crazy, manipulating them, right? Convincing them that the evil is out there, that the bad, right? Literally like putting demons in their head, making them, convincing them of what's going to, right? Trapping them in their mind. And when they do this, they lopside people. And then these people are very easy to manipulate and control because they don't have a guiding star. They don't have a northern star. They don't have a way to find the truth because they've turned them off in some way. So either they're giving into their cravings and they're just consuming, so they're gluttons, right? Or they're giving into their thoughts, right? And so they're overthinking, and there you go, right? That's the problem. That you have these people that, whether you have stress and you think too much or you're depressed, you're going to have problems. Or if you're numb or you don't want to think at all, right? All those things are issues because they all drain your energy. And when they drain your energy, they are spiritually draining your soul. And the less soul that you have, the less will you have, the easier you are to manipulate. And then on top of that, once they've completely drained you of your energy, you're going to start draining others of their energy because you didn't have anybody there for you. And now why would anybody have the right to have anything positive in their life too? And so it's this idea of kicking the sandcastle down after you don't have one, right? So people start to do this to each other. And so this affects a lot of men out there. There's a lot of men who've grown up in toxic households. They grew up with a lack of a father figure or a toxic father figure, maybe a toxic mom. Just challenges from day one, not being provided good education on self-care, not being provided good understanding on personal development, not being provided good role models for copying behavior, right? If we keep being propagandized, all these people that are, for example, like athletes or like people that are celebrities, and we keep pushing them and putting that in their face, especially if they lack any kind of interest outside of just watching media. Well, yeah, like they're going to look up to people who were lucky in the sense that they were doing something specific that allowed them to obtain a lot of money, and now they're being posted on things because it perpetuates that cycle. And then your children start to idolize them, but they don't understand the subcontext, and that's not parenting, right? And so when you lack like that parental guidance, the children grow up not understanding how to be healthy humans, how to be, functioning adults, because they never were given the tools and insight to develop into that because they didn't have good role models. Because kids want to follow their parents. I mean, how many kids out there grow up and then want to go find what happened to their mom or dad? It happens all the time, right? So there's an innate desire to understand. I mean, another thing too, how many people have been fucked up by their families? It happens all the time. You see it like over and over where you have these situations where families are just getting completely, destroyed, and it's impacting the entire like generational line, right? And more we're knowing, the impact of not having a dad around and not having a male role model. And there's a lot of reasons why male role models are not there, whether they're getting locked up, they're making mistakes and things are happening, and they're out there, their souls are lost. They lose their soul. Another thing I'll remind you guys too, the school system has not been around that long. So I don't know whoever told you, but the school system is new. And so whoever wants to tell you that the school system is super effective and great for people and it's what you need to do, like just remember, like it's a self-fulfilling prophecy in there. So of course, people that are school people are going to promote the school. Like that's their job. Like they're school people. They have to like justify their position. But I want you to remember, like if we look at a global context, how many people that are older will tell you school helped me. School was the thing I needed to change my life. Like there are some people that do that, but the majority would have much rather have had a skill or some kind of thing that they could have really like honed in on and been able to craft and develop into something more, just like humans have been doing for a long time. All right. Like when you specialize in something, when you know what you're doing or whatever you're getting into, and you're able to do that from a young age and be inspired and grow, you're going to grow a lot further. You're going to grow and get a lot further than people that are just getting a general education. It's just facts. Like, how are you going to like look at your abilities when you're have a general ed and expect that people are going to think that you can do something that's a specialized skill? It's literally called general education. And when that becomes the only vessel for change, well, then you run into a problem where you have stagnation, right? Because everybody has general education. And so it's nothing. It means nothing. But when you have a skill set, when you have something that you can offer, it means something. This is what I teach men all the time too. It's important to remember to have a skill set, to have something that is of value, and try to find ways to like improve that individuality. Whether you're a very specific type of mechanic, right, or whether you're a very specific type of creator, like whatever you're doing, get really good at what you do, and being good at something is already a skill set. I mean, you literally will go watch videos of people that know how to do stuff. You read books on people that know how to do stuff. They're literally selling you, or they are valuing their energy. That's what it is. But when you don't have value to the energy that you provide, that's when you start to lose your own value. So it's super important to be able to develop a skill set outside of just general education, outside of like just school, and start really building an identity for yourself. Like, what am I offering to the world? What can I get good at? What is my specialty? What's the thing I can wake up every day and do? And you got to find what that is. And over time, as you get more invested and involved, you're just going to grow as a person, as a business, whatever that is that you're doing, and you're going to keep growing because that's your calling. That's what you were meant to do. That's what it's passionate for. And I'll tell you this: when you guys work for somebody, like for example, you get a job, right? You're making like 30 an hour. So you start there and you're not that great at the job because you just start, right? So you're going to make mistakes and you're probably not going to be as like efficient and effective as everybody that's been there for years. But after a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, your work quality has gone immensely up compared to when you started. But how much more pay has gone up? And so they get you with this initial price, but just as your productivity, your quality of work goes up, your pay stagnates. It doesn't grow, but your abilities are definitely getting better. And actually, they've been wanting them to get better because in order to get those raises that you had before, you were having to do way better at your job. You were having to improve your performance in some way. So theoretically, the reason why you've already gotten some raises is because you were already doing well or better. So it's interesting to see how our quality of work, what we can do, the capabilities that we have, the specialties that we have, aren't being valued because someone else is setting the price for us. They're telling us what our value is to them, right? So even though we are making triple more, quality of service, whatever you want to call it, we're not seeing that benefit. And so what I recommend people to do is really get into your own skill, your own abilities, your own insights, and develop into who you really want to be, because that specialized ability is what's going to help you out, is what's going to help you grow and develop into the person that you're meant to be. And so you want to be able to hone in on something that you're good at and just really start figuring out your niche in that community, like why that's for you, right? But always be growing and evolving. Don't limit yourself to one thing, right? Like, become the master of whatever that domain may be, because we need people in all kinds of different domains anyways, right? And there's enough people in the world to be able to satisfy most of those things, as long as, again, you're following what your purpose is. You're doing what you're passionate for. And people can experience passion. When you have passion for something, you put a lot more effort into it, right? When you're at a job you have passion for, you're going to work way harder, right? When you have, a type of hobby or an interest, what we call them passions anyways. But when you're really into something and you have passion for it, you're going to put a lot more work towards it, and it's not going to be as draining. This applies also for school. Like when you're doing some kind of subject that you're really passionate for, it's something that fascinates you anyways. And so you're going to be able to grow and adapt and develop and really find your niche in that community, especially because, again, you have a passion for it. Now, I do recommend, do not try to make your hobbies into your like careers. Try to keep them separated to some extent. So like, you can, let's say you're really good at like, sewing, right? And so you like to make crafts and things like that. And so that's your hobby, but you get really good at some things where like you can probably make some income because people want things that you make, right? So you can totally do that. But what you would do is you would create like a storefront like a very specified type of program where you're like, this is what we're selling, this is what we're offering. So you want to be really specific about what you're offering here. And then you have like your side project over here where you're going to do whatever the fuck you want. So you're going to fuck around over here, but over here, you're going to keep it serious, right? Like, this is what I'm offering, this is what I'm doing. And then you keep them separated as well, like what I'm doing and when I'm doing it. And you'll see this a lot too, like in musicians, where you have artists that will, have their main label, their main music, their main whatever. And then over here, they have a side project where they're doing something completely different. Like, maybe they're a rocker when they're doing EDM over here, or they're doing some kind of rap. So depending on like what they're doing, they're allowing themselves to have a space where they can still be creative and not feel held back by their label, held back by their income. And you want to do this in your life too. And this actually applies to a lot of things. Like, this also applies for working out. So you want to have workouts where you're working on your actual like physical health, and like you're keeping up with minimums. I call it the credit system. So if you have like you're going to do 2 hours a day, then anytime you don't do 2 hours a day, you're gonna have to make up those hours another day. So you're gonna have to do another half an hour or an hour, and like push yourself those days to make up for those days. Or you can do hours ahead of time. So you can add an extra half an hour, so you can have a day off. But the idea is that you're keeping up with your minimums, like you're keeping up your own like habits, so that eventually you build that consistency enough where you don't need to have these like really strict habits, because your body will tell you, hey, we need to go, we need this. You build that muscle memory to really feel yourself out, and then you can accommodate. But I do recommend having as well, like exercise, having fun, right? This could be dancing, surfing, whatever you like to enjoy doing. But that's extra. That doesn't count as your workout time. That counts as you enjoying life. And so the body has different ways that we account for like different things, like for example, physical health, right? So there's the fun way and there's the productive way, right? So there's this pattern will play out in different ways, where like even with creativity, okay? Creativity requires two things. You need to use the focus from the mind, the conscious state, and the imagination, which is the feeling state. And so when you feel and focus and you put that pressure down, it allows it to come out and spray, right? So again, you need to be able to feel and focus to be able to get ahead and create. So these things all have problems when we don't take care of them. So if I don't take care of my emotional state, whether I'm overly emotional and always just fucking pissed off, or I'm overly numb and I'm not feeling anything, these two sides are going to heavily impact the way I live and the way I live my life, right? I move forward. Same thing if I'm overthinking or I'm not thinking. So if I'm overthinking, I'm always in my mind, I'm overly conscious. And if I'm not thinking, I'm not conscious at all. And so you can see, like, when you have no cravings or too many cravings, you got problems, right? So you want to just have enough feeling or enough craving to like experience. And when you have too much consciousness or no consciousness, that's a problem. You want to be just conscious enough to be able to make good decisions and move forward. So yeah, life's really big about finding like the balance, right? For a lot of things, and finding that like, hey, I can do something productive. It could be enjoyable for me and make an income, but I still need to have my fun, right? I still need to be able to enjoy life, or like at least find life's like meaningful. Like I want to look forward to living. I want to be excited. This could also bring me to the idea of the male lonely epidemic. What's going on right now? This is really simple. At the end of the day, like, we're social creatures, so we need to understand that we need to be around people. But people need to change the way they view what living is, and they need to go back to cutting out all people. Like what I did when I was changing my life, I cut off my social media anywhere from 6 to 8 months. I forgot exactly how long, but around that time I cut it out. And I didn't talk to anybody. And I just focused on what do I want from life? What is going to help me be me? And so I really needed to find the way I needed to vibrate in this world, right? What energy was I going to give off? What was I going to become? And I had to literally cut everybody off and just find my passions, hobbies, and interests, my independence, my future, my self-respect again. And so when I did all those things, when I changed the way I reviewed my world and reacted, this gave me an opportunity to really like develop a consistent sense of self, which then gave me the ability to put boundaries to the people around me. So now that I know who I was, I could put limits on the people around me who I felt were impacting my life, right? And so now instead of taking on their energy, I was able to put boundaries down and hold them like, hey, accountable, and be assertive with what I want. Like, hey, I understand your perspective, but this is where I'm at, and leave it at that, and not have to get all reactive and not have to worry, and just, I know what I want, and this is what I'm looking for. And I had to change. I had to listen to my gut. I had to trust my gut. My gut had to guide me now, because my conscious state was limiting me for a long time. And that's why I had lost myself, because I've lost my ability to feel too and have empathy. Right? You lose empathy for others because you're just cold inside, right? Or you're lost in your mind. Right? So I had to turn my mind off and let my gut run free so that I could understand what I needed to do in my life. And that's when my life changed. And that's why, again, we need to be able to listen to both of our vessels, right? Like both parts of our vessel, the gut and the mind, because they work together to create the beautiful world that we live in, right? We have to be able to have cravings for this world because that gives us a sense of direction, right? And then we have to have a heart because that gives us drive to get there. But then I have to use my mind because I want to be able to get there within a reasonable time, right? I want to be able to achieve what I want. And I needed all three of the parts of the vessel to be able to function as a team to get to where I want. And so when we have male lonely epidemic, it's because we need to first figure out who we are. That the best way to be with somebody and not be alone is to be with yourself and to be comfortable with being with yourself. Once you know how to be with yourself, then people want to be around you because you complement their existence. You don't become a dependent on their existence. But you have to learn to exist within yourself, just kind of like how monks do it, right? Or how people that are trying to like go on a spiritual journey here, like going in like the mountains and hiking and stuff, they gotta go find themselves. And so this is a journey of like self development, self identity. Even Superman, Batman, I don't know, how have to learn to be okay with themselves. I mean, if you're a Batman guy, then watch. Batman used to be with the monks. He used to train. He used to learn how to be okay with being with himself, so he wouldn't be afraid anymore, because he had the light inside of him. That's why he can see in the dark, right? I mean, Superman has the Fortress of Solitude, where he just has to go and think for a while. Sometimes he just has to go and be by himself. I think that's the key to being a successful man, is being able to be by yourself and appreciating the energy that you have and what you have to offer, right? And having some self-respect in the sense that have limits in your life. Like if you feel you're doing something too much, then start making a plan to change that. Don't ignore it. Don't blame others for it. Find the ability inside of you to put a limit on yourself and appreciate yourself, appreciate your energy. Because remember this, the number one killer in the world is heart disease. What can cause that? Well, two things: whether you're overly stressed out all the time, or you're overly emotional, right? Or you're numb, whatever, right? You're not respecting the gut, which is the cravings, and you're not respecting the mind, which is the conscious state. So whether you're overly conscious all the time, or you're lacking that sense of fulfillment because you're craving everything, or you're giving into your cravings all the time, it's not going to be good for your heart, because the more that you give into cravings, the worse your blood flow is going to be. And the more you give into your conscious state, the worse your nervous system is going to be. And those are the two most important pieces of technology that protect the heart and allow the heart to literally flourish. Because what's the heart pumping? Blood. And what's pumping with the heart? The electrical nervous system, the energy. And so, you're going to lose a lot of willpower by pumping it all into your heart, just trying to stay alive. So that's why it's important to make sure that you're taking care of your mind and your body, to really find yourself. And once you find that inner peace, you will get a lot of people that want to come talk to you. You get a lot of people that want to come be around you. And you don't have to know everything. You just have to know where you're at that moment, and what you do know and what you don't know. The thing you need to know is who you are. That's it. That's the main problem. So when people ask you who you are, you just say it. You're not looking for a response. You're not looking for like a reaction. You're just speaking from your heart, and you're just being consistent. That's why the voice is like casting a spell, because that spell that you're casting has to do with the force of the voice that you're using, the energy that you're putting forth with the communication style that you're using. So it's important to take into account that you're using, your voice as a type of tool, as a mechanism, as a weapon, as a mechanism to, stay a point. When you're speaking with power, when you're speaking with confidence, you can feel it within the voice. And the voice is a physical manifestation of the spirit, and the spirit is a manifestation of the mind and the gut. So what you say and how you say it is heavily dependent on how you're feeling and what you're thinking. And so the voice is a direct reflection of those things. So the reason why the eyes are the windows to the soul. If you see somebody in the dark, right? Their pupils are all dilated, right? They're all big. And so when you shine a light on somebody in the dark, the first reaction they give you is, "Ow, you're hurting me, right? You're hurting me because you're exposing me with the light." And so that's what it feels like for people who are living in the shadows, in the dark. The people that are lying, manipulating, that are taking advantage of others, they're living in the dark. And so when you expose them with a light, which is that fire inside, you expose them, then they have a reaction to you. And that reaction is what you're seeing when you put the light on them and you shine that light into their eyes. Well, they react. And that's, again, hitting them with the truth. And so when you hit people with the truth, they're going to have a reaction because they like to live in the lie, the deceit, the veil. So that's something that I also would recommend that, you take care of yourself for, because what that does is that gives you the ability to call people out. So when you see people acting out and you see people like not being the best person, the best version of themselves, and you hit them with the truth, it's going to hurt. But that's because people get uncomfortable when they hear the truth, and that they're exposing them for a reality that they don't want to face. And that reality they want to face is going to be perpetuated by them continuing their lies. And so being able to work on yourself, being able to have that empowerment, being able to, like, find that light inside, that confidence, allows you to expose people as well. And that helps you attract people, because when your light is glowing, like when you're living your best version of yourself and you're just existing, and you're like literally going with the flow of time, like you're just going with the flow of life. Like when you feel like doing something, you go do it. When you don't want to, you don't. Like you're just very consistent with who you are, and you're living a balanced life where you work, you play, you rest, you work, you play, you rest, you have a schedule, you have a routine that you follow. Eventually people who are attracted to that energy that you're giving off, they're going to show up, because you remember that energy that you give off, that vibration that people feel. Well, people are going to start experiencing that vibration with you, and that's going to bring them closer and want to connect with you. And so being at your highest level, being at that frequency that you desire to be, when you're living at your heart's desire, when you're living at the will of God, whatever you want to call it, right? Godspeed, I call it, right? When you're living in that frequency, you're able to really experience a level of connection with the universe. And what that does is that helps bring people, attract you. Just like the stars, right? They bring the planets around them. They bring other, constellations, things. They all get close to each other, all within the same rings and realms. And it's, again, these stars are connecting. So I like to think that when we're vibrating at our frequency, we're going to find our soulmates. So the key to male loneliness is to find peace in being lonely. Is to stop being lonely, the loneliness, and to just be okay with being alone. And once you're okay with being alone, then you can always be okay with being around people, because your life isn't dependent on those around you, and then you don't drain them of their energy in excess. So when they don't give you something, you don't fall apart. You can sustain yourself. And another thing I recommend people do too is, if you want to add someone to your life, whether it's people, a friend or a girl or whatever, what I recommend you do is you have to sustain the life that you're already living. And you need to include them into that schedule, include them into what you're already doing. And if you can't, then they're not going to be for you, right? It's not for you, because this is you. They have to complement who you are, right? We have to work together. We need to be complementary to each other, not forced, because that builds resentment over time. We need to work together, aligned, right? Almost like the DNA, kind of like a star, right? They work together, they align, they connect, and they spin. So they need to work as a team to create that force, right? We work together, right? If we work counter to each other, that's a problem. If we try to pull one direction, one of us, again, is going to be leaving where we were connected, our grounding. And again, it's stronger to bind them together than to force one to go around the other, right? So we want to include people into our lives, but again, while still respecting our autonomy. And that's where I see a lot of people mess up. They're doing really well for themselves, they're growing. They finally start engaging with people, and then what do? They start overcommitting to people. They start getting too in, and it's like you're going back to old patterns, right? Because the whole reason this person came to you, it's like fishing. Like, you just gotta, like, chill. This whole reason they came to you is because they were all about your vibe. They were cool. They wanted to interact with you. If you change who you are, you change your vibe. If you change the way you exist, you change your energy. And that's why people can say, "Hey, something's off with you. Hey, you don't feel like yourself. You're not seeming like you." Well, what are they talking about when they say that? They're saying that the energy that you're giving off, that spiritual energy, that source, that's not feeling the same as it normally does. So something's going on here. And so that change in energy is actually changing the way our whole conversation's playing out, our whole dynamics playing out. So we want to make sure that we understand that if we want to be able to build quality relationships, we have to remember who we are and not change that. And we don't need to change to get everybody's approval. We just need to find that we're living our higher purpose and what we prove. Because everybody's going to have their own version of what they are, just like as much as everybody has their own version of their favorite movie, favorite thing they like to eat, their favorite quote, everything, favorite number. Like people are just wired differently. I mean, if you look on, Xbox Live or PlayStation, look how many usernames there are. A bajillion, right? But everybody has a username. At the end of the day, we have some kind of like variety. Nobody told you what your username had to be. You decided what it was based on the freedom that you had, and we all create a different version of that, right? And so again, when we look at why we need to follow who we are, because that's the best way to live authentically with our full energy, with our full force. I mean, every time we make relationships, what do we always want? Connectiveness. We want to be connected with somebody. We don't want them to not like who we are. We're always afraid of being exposed for who we are. One thing I have to tell people all the time too, like we don't live in high school anymore. Like it's not high school anymore. We're adults now. We live in the reality of Earth. And so a lot of the social dynamics that people were fearful in high school, like social pressure, people being made fun of, all those kind of things, right? So one of the problems with that is that same mentality, that same fear system will continue into adulthood. The problem is when you were a teenager in these situations, you were a teenager surrounded by other teenagers, and teenagers aren't very conscious people. I mean, literally, My Chemical Romance wrote a whole song about teenagers being scary. And so you're no longer a teenager. And that means that the people around you are not full grown adults for the most part. And they're not going to have the same responses as teenagers did because they didn't have the prefrontal cortex developed. The ability to filter and mask behaviors is really only apparent after 20. 20 is really when you start to see like a change in, yes, sir, I'm going to do that. No problem, sir. Like a change in the way they interact with orders, interact with things that counter their feelings, masking, we could call it. And so these kids don't know how to mask at those ages. So when they're, causing emotional damage, it's really just a reflection of where they're at in their development. Once you're an adult, things change because again, people have that prefrontal cortex. People actually don't want to like get fired or let go from their work. They actually care about what people think. They care what their neighbors think. Like for the most part, not everybody, right? Because again, there's a lot, like I said earlier, a lot of chaos in this world. A lot of people that prefer to spread misery. But for the most part, we want to be able to put down those limits with people and get further and get ahead. And I want to be able to help people understand that the communication style that you use is going to help you get further and get down, get ahead. The better that you are at setting limits and boundaries, and the better you are at understanding your potential, the better that things are going to start coming your way. And living in the moment is really important too. I want you guys to live in the moment. Living in the moment is taking back your energy from the stress brain, right? Putting it forward into time and taking your energy back from the depression brain and really focusing on the right now brain, or living mindfully, when you can really experience things happening in the moment. And so that's why again we're having these issues, because we need people to remember that they have the power to find who they are, and then that it's going to give them the ability to connect with what I call their soulmates, because they start vibrating at their frequency and they all connect on that same level. So yeah, male loneliness has a lot to do with that. Another thing I see a lot of men struggling with is dating. The dating epidemic right now. That's another simple one to really like break it down to the most basics. Men need to really focus on following what their goals are for life, like really establishing like who they are, and stop focusing on dating women. So the focus on dating women takes away all your energy from self-development. And what women really value is a self-developed man, a man that knows what he wants. They're even more willing to listen to a man that knows what he's talking about, because it is like, well, he knows, he's successful. He always knows what he's saying. He's very collective and put together, and he has a lot to show for it. And so the more that we value ourselves, the more that we work on our consistency, our positive communication, our ability to get things done, the more that we're going to be heard. And when we put down limits, they're going to be respected more too. So it's really important, like I said, if you want to be in a relationship, to find who you are first. You got to figure out, what are you working towards? What are your goals? Like, if you had a jigsaw puzzle and you had a vision of like what you want from your life, what would it look like? Like, what would that complete picture be? And then putting the pieces in each spot, what's that going to look like? And this is where spirit comes into play again, because in order for this thing to into like play and to come into reality, I have to be able to keep putting these pieces there. So that's the magic of humanity, is I have the ability to put the pieces. Now, does that mean I'm always going to find the piece on the first go? No. Sometimes I've been looking for a piece for a while and I can't find it, so I got to work on another spot until I figure out a way to finish that piece. But I don't give up on working on the jigsaw. But if I keep changing the outer image of what I want, I'm never going to be able to accomplish to get to that goal. So I really need to hone in on, okay, what does my ultimate goal look like? What does the outcome that I want look like? And I have to sustain that so that I can build towards that next goal, that next development, like what I'm looking for. So it's important to really like break down for ourselves and understand that, hey, I can still work towards the things that I want as long as I do it little by little, but I have to make sure that I'm envisioning what I want and that's what I'm looking for. And so when someone comes into my life and they want to come in, I already can tell them, hey, look, this is what I want from life. And I'm telling you from the very beginning, this is who I am. And if you're cool with that, cool. And if you're not, hey, I get it, no problem. But trying to change your vision for this person is going to drain where you put all your energy. So you're going to start losing heart, you're going to start losing willpower over time because you keep putting all your will into this person, but they never had the same dream that you had, anyways. So no matter how hard you work towards this, it was never what you wanted from life. And you're never going to be fully happy because at the end of the day, you didn't complete what your destiny was. You didn't complete your fulfillment. You didn't follow your desires, your cravings. You didn't use your consciousness to develop yourself. You gave yourself away to somebody else and you gave them all your energy. And that's the problem. So we really want to focus again, go back to, what is my goal? What is my destiny? And how can I get to a place where I'm fully invested in myself? I'm, developing my own craft. I'm developing into the interests and passions that I have. I'm making connections, because you can make business connections and fun connections, right? Business connections are going to be the connections where, hey, this is how it's going to go. This is what we're going to do. I'd love to do a group meeting there. I'd love to do this, get involved. And then the fun connections are, hey, me and my buddies, we're going to go to Hawaii. Hey, we're going to go do here. We're going to go do that, like the people that go to Vegas or whatever, right? So you make connections with people and those now become your friends. And, I like to say, like, video games too, there's people in video games where like you play one game with them and that was just the game you play with that person and you never play with them again. And then you have your friends that you play different video games with. You would transcend the game because it's not the game that's the thing that keeps you together. It's the friendship that keeps you together. So you have people that are going to take the different dimensions with you, right? Dimensional travelers, you could say, adventurers with you, lifelong adventures. And that's how life is. You might get to know someone, had a really good connection with them while you were, enjoying this card shop or this bar or whatever, right? This event, this venue. And then if they end up leaving, you never see them again. And that's okay. It's not a deficit to you that you weren't good enough or whatever. It's just what that relationship was meant to be in that part of your life, right? So then you move forward again. If life was meant to happen that way, it's going to happen that way because you're living at the most authentic version of yourself. But you spending your time trying to give your energy to somebody that's not vibrating with you is wasting the time you could be spend finding the next person that will vibrate with you. But again, ultimately, you have to be vibrating at your frequency. your energy level, your future, your reality for that person to come. And again, that's how you have empathy. So if you want to have a healthy relationship, you have to continue to have empathy for each other. And empathy comes from someone that is consciously working on themselves and also following their cravings and giving into some of their desires. Because that you gotta have a little bit of fun. You gotta have a little bit of little good stuff in your life, right? So yeah, the other thing I want to briefly talk about real quick is another epidemic I see happening to a lot of men that I know too. And I said this before, is the lack of push they need from their like parental figures. I see a lot of people who are, I would call them moochers. They're really like not self-developing. Their parents are still picking up their teenage children from school. Like they're not pushing themselves. Like these people are just lacking that development, lacking that push. And I like this. I've heard the term failure to launch as an example. And this is something that's affecting our society at a grand scale. When you have guys who are not being pushed to understand the world, to not be pushed to develop some kind of skill, some kind of like ability, they're just not launching. They're stagnating. And it's because you have people in their lives that are enabling them to continue this system, to continue this failure to launch. And the only real way to get them to change is you have to hold them to the fire. You have to say, hey, look, this is it. Like you need to change. You need to do something different. And it's that same addict behavior, right? That I'm helpless. I don't know, da da da. But the only way to know is to have some kind of sense of suffering. And this could have been avoided if we just would have started the process early on and taught children how to have some kind of sense of self, discipline, self respect, and really followed their heart from a young age, they would have probably been a lot better off. But when you don't have children suffer to some extent to be able to learn and grow from mistakes, then they end up stagnating and they end up not growing. And they grow into adults who don't know what they're doing. And then they struggle with sustaining relationships. They struggle with having purpose in their life. And when you struggle with these things, you're going to struggle with having friends and you're going to struggle with getting into relationships because you have to have fun. But in order to have fun as an adult, you have to work because work relieves stress, which then allows you to engage in fulfillment. But if you can't negate stress, then you can't experience the fulfillment. So, this is a very important process for taking care of oneself. I have to be able to get my stress out, work on who I am, my independence, future, and self respect, and then I have to have my passions, hobbies, and interests so that I can rest appropriately. And that's really the only way that we're going to grow as a person is that we have to have a balance in our lives. The balance is what's going to allow our spirit to be at its highest capacity, that vibration to be at its highest capacity, and that'll allow the people to feel comfortable coming into my life, right? So you got to get out there and get independent. You got to get out there and find who you are. You got to get out there and explore life and take risks and chances. And so what if the people make fun of you one day? That's just going to be a funny story that people are going to talk about from years to come. Hey, remember that first time? Yeah, that was funny. But they've seen you grow over time. They've seen you become the person that you're meant to be. And they were advocates the whole time, right? And again, we got to get out of the high school mentality of everyone's going to do this. Da, da, da. That's not happening in adults. And if you are afraid of that, then you're not ready to be there yet. And that's okay. Go work on yourself. Go find yourself. But remember, the greatest of anything, the best people had to make mistakes to get the way they were. Everybody has to make mistakes, but they're not really mistakes. They're just like learning like curves. Like they're just part of the learning process. So it's like, yeah, oops, that didn't work out. I better change it. Like you're driving, but you're not crashing. You're just learning how to get a sense of the vehicle. Or it's like riding a bike. It's you're gonna get a couple scrapes on the way, but there's a point where you haven't fallen in a long time, and the only thing that's gonna have you fall is something out of your control, right? And so we have to recognize that too. I know a lot of people that are very willingly to take on like things that are not even in their control. So they're willing to take on like emotional like problems, other people's issues, and just keep taking it in like it's their own when it's really not. And then that's another thing. People will take advantage of people who are not willing to put boundaries down, who are not willing to accept reality and say no more. So I highly recommend people put down limits, put down boundaries, appreciate your time, energy, and attention, which I call your spirit, and make sure that you are investing in yourself. Find your purpose, build your jigsaw, develop the vision of what you want from life, and keep moving forward to fulfill it. Keep pushing yourself to get to that grander purpose. Because at that frequency, you're then going to be able to connect with the people that are meant to be in your life. All right. All right, guys. It's been a pleasure talking to you guys today. Again, I want you guys to keep moving forward in your life. I appreciate everybody that came and was here for the ride today. And I'll see you guys in 2 weeks. Okay. Take it easy. Later.